Welcome to the Eric Brady podcast, Series 1, Adolf Hitler, His Bombers and Me. Episode 15, Kitty's Time in Wales. Eric, what do you know of your sister's time as an evacuee in Wales?
I have an idea of what her life was like there, partly because of what she said when on the one occasion she came to visit me, but also when we were at home together back in London for the 4 months that I was there before there was the bombing incident on Sandhurst Road School. We also talked of our different experiences, and Kitty would describe how very happy she was with this family, just a foster father and foster mother. There were no other children there. And she became in the situation of an only daughter. And their relationships became very close over the length of time that Kitty was there.
You've described your mother's visit to Wales and her describing the situation with the bombing, and you not being that worried as a young child, finding it exciting. But it was different for Kitty, wasn't it?
When our mother went and talked to Kitty's foster parents and talked to the neighbours as well, Kitty, being that much older, did have a much greater understanding of deaths and injuries in the way that I hadn't, being that much younger. And so it must have been very worrying for her, hearing all that was going on in London where her parents were.
And worrying for her foster parents as well.
Indeed, because of the close relationship that Kitty had with her foster parents. And unfortunately, our mother became very jealous. And that was so unfortunate because that meant that our mother saw the foster mother as rivals rather than companions. And so there was no way in which she would develop a friendly bond with the foster family. They were also concerned about another angle that they only discussed when Kitty had gone to bed. And that was what happened to the foster children if something happened to their parents. Either they were killed in the Blitz or severely injured. And the reply they got was rather an assumption of my mother's, but was an accurate assumption as it happened, that the council would look for any relatives that would take responsibility for the evacuee, not necessarily take them back to London, but take responsibility that the parents would have had. We didn't have close connections with any of our other relatives on either side, my mother's or my father's, in London. And for various reasons, for which I don't know the full story, our mother decided that rather than try to foster us with her relatives that did live outside London a bit, it was decided that we should be evacuated. And so Kitty's foster parents, I was told by my mother, wrote to her and asked that in case anything happened to our father and mother, they would be perfectly content to look after Kitty for as long as necessary. And would they be prepared, our parents, to sign a letter to say that in order to make sure that they would be able to keep Kitty? But that incensed my mother, being already jealous of Kitty's relationship with her foster parents. And so she told my father that they were obviously out to steal Kitty from her. And those were the words that my mother used to me when talking to me about this years later.
How long did you stay in Wales and how did you come to return to London?
I stayed about 2.5 to 3 years, and what happened was that my father had become very ill with double pneumonia in March 1942, and was asking for Kitty in his delirium. So my mother arranged for Kitty to go back to London. And from what Kitty said, her understanding was that would just be until Dad was better. But when Dad did get better, in fact, our mother wouldn't let her go back because of her jealousy of the foster mother. And Kitty really resented this because she loved the place where she was, which was in a different town from Tredegar where I was, and apparently was further towards the Brecon Beacons, and she could see mountains from her bedroom window and from the street, and so it was more of a rural atmosphere. And of course, where we were living were in the narrow, crowded streets of London. So she really loved Wales, as well as her foster parents.
To buy your copy of Adolf Hitler, His Bombers and Me to read alongside the series, go to ericbradybooks.co.uk. The Eric Brady podcast can be found on YouTube, podcast services, and at ericbrady.blogspot.com.